one important thing is to think about that the camera really is the viewer's head. So this is true in traditional cinema too, but the 360 is very, very much the experience that if you put on a headset, wherever that camera was on the set is where you feel like your head is. And so this is an image of a thing that we do in traditional cinema all the time. Right? It's a very common shot called a hostess tray shot where we want to see somebody inside of a car. We put the camera out the window and we point it towards the car. You could do this with a 360 camera. I tried by that thing to make it high enough. But you know, if this is our subject, we think, oh, this looks great, and we watch it and we're playing it, and we don't realize that right over here, you know, there's something happening. You know, those guys that are sitting behind him are having a conversation, or they're I don't know what they're doing. They're doing something that could potentially be distracting to your viewer. It's really easy to get caught up with, my subject looks great, I'm used to a square frame, I'm used to traditional cinema where this is what I care about and it looks great, and you completely overlook something that's just off the side that's completely distracting, that's a problem, that's a continuity issue, or just a distracting element, or some other factor that you're only going to notice if you're watching the headset and you take the time to look around and really get a sense of the whole scene, not just the one detail that seemed like the most important thing when you shot it. Audio always gets short shrift, and it's so unfortunate because sound is more important than pictures. And as anybody has done film or video creation, I'm sure you know that. Like, sound is more important. Picture, you got the crappiest picture, but if the sound is good, people will watch it. If you have beautiful pictures and the sound is terrible, no one will watch it. Like, sound is everything. And in 360, that's even more true than with regular video. Because, again, I'm talking about the immersive environment where you're wearing a headset and where you're wearing headphones. If you are not, if the sound is not compelling and it creates a natural environment, the whole experience is not going to feel organic and natural. And so getting your sound right is really critical. And to get the sound right, there's a couple of tools that you can use. First of all, there are microphones called ambisonic microphones, or like the top one, these are called binaural microphones, where they literally simulate a head listening. But those are honestly less common to use. But this mic down here, this is basically 4 mics pointing in different directions, and it works exactly the same way as the camera, where you've got multiple cameras pointing in different directions, and then the sound field is stitched together to create a spherical sound world that creates a natural environment that your viewer will be able to listen in. And there, to your question earlier about cameras on the mics, some of the cameras have this sort of mic built into them. Some of them have more, must be in as close proximity to the microphone, must be in as close proximity to the camera as possible. The problem with that is that, anybody know what the most important thing is in terms of recording good quality audio?
You have to be close to the subject.
Proximity, yes. You have to be close to the subject. To get good quality audio, you want your microphone as close as possible to the subject. By definition, if your microphone is sitting on or built into your camera, it's not going to be right close up to the people who are talking or moving around within your shot. And so what we typically do for production, for 360 production, is we'll generally use a ambisonic microphone, either dangling above, like one of these things hanging above or below the camera, to have that as an ambient background, but it's really not our primary audio. The primary audio is recorded with lavaliers or plant mics, which is to say hidden microphones in a place close to the actual sound subjects, and I should say, recorded secondarily, like through Foley or sound effects, so that if there are specific noises in your scene, and this is just as true for nonfiction or whatever, you might, if you don't get a good quality sound the first time, you can always record it secondarily, but record it with regular mono microphones, and that is the primary source of your audio. And then in post-production, you mix those using special mixing software. You assign the sound to a place in the frame. So this is an image of a lat long, of an equirectangular image, and there are these little indicators here. These are where the sound is being pinned to in the mixing environment. So this is not the best visual example, this is what the software company provided. But so the sound of the river, this is like the waterfall. We want the sound of the waterfall to be coming from the waterfall. We want the sound of these leaves to be coming from the rustling leaves over here. And if an object was moving, we could keyframe it so that that object was moving along with the shot, the object, the person walking, or whatever it is in the frame. Then this sound is exported into a special format that can be embedded with your video, and then when it's played back, when you turn your head, the sound sounds like it's in the right place. And so when you're looking over here, a dog barks over there. If you turn your head and you look at the dog, now it sounds like the dog is right in front of you because you've turned your head. And that's called directional or spatialized sound for the playback. And I'm not going to get into the technical details of how of the encoding and the format names and stuff that are easy to find, and you know. But the concept is what's important to understand, that while an ambisonic mic at recording time is helpful, what's much more common and much more effective is to use regular recording methods, but to use the mixing software to place it.
Maybe you're going to go there, but like you know, showed us some cameras. Do you have some software packages that you that you work with, that you prefer to work with? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, Facebook made it easy because they made theirs free. And so Facebook has they call it the Facebook 360 Spatial Workstation, and it is actually a series of plugins for Pro Tools or Reaper or Logic, and so you can use their plugins and everything, and it's a series of apps and plugins that basically provide a mixing environment like this. This is actually a third-party one called Blue Ripple, and it actually has a lot more features to it. It's a little bit more sophisticated, but it's expensive, or it's not free. And the Facebook one is free. So the vast majority of people are using the Facebook tools, and that's the tool I would recommend.
Have you worked with any of your films in like Unity and used any of the audio stuff in Unity for spatialized sound?
I haven't. Obviously, I'm sure that's also something that's being done.
Okay.
And if your final output, if you're building an app, or if your final output is effectively going to be a Unity Engine app, then that would probably be a viable option too. Yeah. So sound is really, really critical. Music, ambience, all of the sound effects and the individual elements that we use for traditional cinema for a good sound mix are doubly important for 360, because if your goal is to create that immersive surrounding experience. So I don't give it a lot of time in the lecture, but I do think it's something I want to make sure you take home as such an important detail.
In traditional video and movies, we kind of accept the presence of music, even though it's an artificial component. Is that a problem?
It's a great question, and I don't think it's been answered. I think that there are, when you said that immediately, I thought of one piece that I've seen where I remember thinking, it's totally weird that music's playing right now. It totally feels unnatural that music is playing. But I don't think that means it can't work. I think that there are probably going to be contexts in which it might be unnatural, because everything else feels so fully realistic.
Yeah. On the other hand, that was cutting, and music was unrealistic in the beginning as well, and
we get used to
artists trained us how to accept.
And I think that's happening with this medium too. I think all of these features, all of these elements, we are getting used to that.
We're getting used to how to view it.
Yeah, that's right. We're learning how to view it. We're
You
learning
show
how
a
to view
picture to certain primitive tribes, they can't see it.
Yeah, right. They can't even read it. Yeah. So stitching, I'm not going to get into the details of how we do it. I just want to acknowledge that this is an important part of the process, and that there is a lot of software designed for doing this. Auto Panel Pro or Auto Panel Video is probably the most widely used, again, partly because it is affordable of these tools. It's still $500 or $600, I think. It's $68 on Amazon?
I would recommend anyone interested in learning or filmmaking get that camera.
So I was just joking that like this too is only now.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, but,
Mystica is another one that's missing that's more affordable. It's say 70 viewers per month.
yeah, right.
Mystica VR?
Mystica, yeah.
How good does it sound?
Can't you do this in Premiere?
That's a good.
No, you can't do stitching in Premiere or After Effects. Stitching is specifically tying together the images from the different cameras. Now, many of those cameras that I showed you guys that I recommended often come with their own stitching software, custom designed for their cameras. So InstaVR has their own software, Zcam has their own software, Nokia has their own software, and so on. So a lot of that is stitching, and I think that in a couple of years, all of the stitching will become part of the process of shooting, and we will not have to deal with it, but we still do deal with it now. And the truth is that all of those stitching methods that we have are all still flawed. And even the best stitching systems that we have often wind up with little errors here or there, or it's just a creative choice. You have to decide, do you want that foreground object to be stitched properly, or do you want the background object? You can't have both. Just the nature of the image, both can't be accurate because the cameras were pointing from different angles, so there's a parallax discrepancy.
So that comes back to the issue of laying out the scene correctly with the camera.
Absolutely, that's right. The more you can avoid junk on your stitch lines, movement on your stitch lines, close to your camera, the less that's going to be an issue. But it's a never-ending dilemma with this content.
How long do you think it'll be before there's a decent spherical sensor that just removes that problem forever?
I mean, I don't know, but I've not seen any prototypes, I've not seen any technology demonstrations, I've not seen anything implying it's anytime soon. You know, there's light field technology.
Oh, yeah.
You know, although, Google just bought Lytro and basically dismantled it.
That's so sad.
Yeah, like last month. So anyway, that's a whole other category.
So this is for a program for stereo mix, right?
These are mostly for mono. I don't know if you can do stereo. I think you can do stereo in probably most of them, but it's not one or the other. It's generally not. It's generally stereo. You're just doing it twice. You know what I mean? You're just doing it two versions. Yeah.
So this one determines where the sound's coming from, correct?
This is not about sound at all. This is about creating the image.
Oh,
creating.
sorry.
No, this is talking about the stitching of the visual.
Oh, okay.
Stitching the camera images.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the sound would be done in the mostly like that Facebook tool or those other programs. Yeah, this is creating the visual, the spherical image. I talked briefly earlier about the idea of a quick stitch or a fine stitch. If anybody remembers the old school of online, offline video editing, we're back to that problem of like stitching is computationally expensive. It takes a lot of time for the operator. It's a hard thing to do, and so frequently what you will do, or what everyone will do currently, is do a quick stitch, which is to say a low-res, crappy stitch of all of your source footage. Let's say you've got an hour of source footage, you're making a 5-minute movie. You do a quick stitch of the entire hour of your source footage. You edit that down to the 5 minutes you're going to wind up using, and then you only do a fine stitch on that 5 minutes. And that's a pain. It would sure be nice if we didn't have to do that second step and then go back and re-stitch our footage. But again, that's just the nature of the market right now, that it's just too complicated and expensive to do a fine stitch for all of your footage.
As an analog to film.
Same idea.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a work print and a release print.
I mess around with simply, getting a shot, being aware of the stitch lines and everything, and then shoot a clean plate, usually before at 30 degrees, turn, right? And then using soft wipes to graduate.
Yeah,
the
great
stitch.
idea. I'm going to show you an image. Is it right here? No, it's a couple more about creating what I call visual room tone. But that's a great idea to add to that to help with your stitch lines.
Yeah.
Assuming there's nobody walking or moving in that areas.
Yeah, you're just able to smear the stitch line.
That's a great idea to take a second image of the empty space with the camera rotated slightly, and then those where the stitch lines were are now clean. That's a great tip. So before we get to the piece that's related to that, the editing process, while we don't do a lot of intra-scene editing, cutting from the wide shot to the close-up to the insert to the cutaway, we don't do a lot of that in 360. There is still a big process of editing that does go on. And a lot of that is choosing takes and trimming the clips. right? Because of course, there's always the first 10 seconds where you have the person's face right up and they press go, and then they run away. You have to trim that off at the beginning and end of your shot. But there's also choosing to, if you've run multiple takes, finding the takes that's the best version. When you are assembling a sequence of shots, a tip that I can give that is very important right now, maybe will get less important as people become more used to the footage, is it's really important to give time for your viewer to acclimate to a shot. So when you cut to a new location, if someone is watching their headset and they really feel like, oh my God, wait, now I'm suddenly on Mars, they need a moment to sort of look around and be like, oh, where am I? Before suddenly the alien spaceship lands 5 feet from them and starts shooting at them or whatever it is. Like in traditional film, we've cut all that out. Like you just cut right to the action, cut right to the action, cut right to the action.
That's where you can establish the shot.
Well, sure. And you need to build that establishment shot into your 360, into your
It's
shot.
kind of like viewer 7 time.
Exactly what it is. That's right. Yeah.
You're talking about like shooting a plate shot almost ahead of time?
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But I'm talking about giving time while the camera's rolling, when you cut into a new location, to give the viewer a few seconds to acclimate before the main action of the scene kicks in. And the plate shot is another thing,
Yeah.
which there's some value for, but that's not what I'm talking about in this context. But yeah, the point is that the pacing of editing 360 footage is generally pretty slow. And again, maybe that's going to change in a few years. People will be so used to the medium that we won't mind being thrown through the location and being right in it. But right now, if you don't do that, people tend to be really disoriented. And then they don't know where to look, and then they're looking off the wrong. They're looking over here to make sense of what's going on, and the main action's happening over here, and they're completely confused. And so it's generally accepted practice, at least right now, to give a good 5 seconds at least to give people a sense, to get a sense of, oh, I'm in a new place. What's going on in this new place? What am I looking at? And it's just something to think about that's a little bit different. You do have the opportunity for scene transitions, for how to connect one location to another location. And you can use things like thinking about where is your viewer likely looking at the end of a shot to line up with the beginning of the next shot. I'm actually going to show an example of that in just a second. But when you're shooting, you need to be paying attention to that too. Like, where is the likely end point of this shot? And is my viewer, if this was north when I started the shot, has the subject or the content drifted over to here so that when we end the shot, they're probably looking over to here, and how is that going to affect the transition to the next shot? Because you can't force somebody to turn their head back. They're going to be looking there, you cut, and then you're going to need something to draw them back over, or to be aware of that, at least when you're editing. So this is, again, a way in which editing 360 footage is a little bit different than editing traditional footage, and it's both a creative tool and a technical obstacle to overcome. And then finally, really important, not finally, but in this context of editing 360 footage, it's really important to monitor the output in an HMD. So these lat longs that you're seeing up here, right? When you first see them, and I'm sure this is your experience in this class in general, they're very disorienting and they're really hard to make sense of. You stare at them, you can't really tell what the subject of the shot is, but pretty quickly you get used to them and you know how to read them, and you start saying, oh yeah, I know what's going on in that shot, I know every detail. The problem is, these subtle details of the scene are tiny in the shot, and you're going to miss stuff. And so it's really important to not skip the step of reviewing your footage in an HMV. And there's in most programs like Premiere have a way to do an inset view so you can see a live view of what the HMV sees, which is not as good as having the headset on, but it's better than just editing, looking at this stuff. And again, it's just one of these things that if you skip that step, you're inviting the likelihood that there's some little error, there's some distracting piece that your viewer's going to see that you missed.
I just found out that the new release of Premiere, you can plug in a headset, and in fact, there's some basic editing functions so that you're editing your footage from within your footage.
Yeah, they showed some of that last week.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
They acquired that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Apple's doing their version, which has some things that are better than Premiere and some things that are worse. Overall, I think the Adobe Suite is still the right choice right now, but they will both continue to get better, and hopefully other players too. The center point is one of the other tools you can do in the post-production. This is what I was talking about earlier about adjusting where north is. You can totally change the content of a shot by adjusting where north is when you cut to it. So in this example, I've got the exact same shot, but the center point has been offset. If you begin the shot here, this is a shot of this bartender. It's a little hard to see the details on this projection screen, but this is the shot of a bartender working the bar. And again, he looks tiny, but he's actually right there. He's actually 4 feet away from you. You're going to feel like you're sitting at the bar, and the bartender's working. And that's the shot. If you offset the angle a little bit, just to change the center point, from the bottom, now this is a shot about this guy picking up the wine bottle, which is right in front of your face, and he is talking to this guy over here. It's a totally different shot. And while when you start that shot, any viewer could turn their head and see the other, it's going to feel like a different, or could feel like a different shot, depending on what that starting point is.
When you're blocking, do you find like it's hard to have everybody kind of open up towards the lens?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a real issue because, of course, the lens is not one place.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and it's a real, and I honestly, I haven't solved it. Like, I don't know how you get around that. And there are definitely cases where I've seen mistakes in my work and others where it's like, yeah, it's just not, you don't have the control that we're used to having. So, but this being able to adjust the center point is a way that you can reframe your shot in post. You can't do any push-ins. We do a lot of cleanup with traditional cinema where we punch in on a shot a little bit to get a different angle. Can't do that at all. You cannot zoom in one bit or you'll have a big seam line on the edge, because this wraps around over to here, and so you can't do any scale repo, but you can do this one thing of adjusting the center point of the shot. Talking about that center point, this is an example of an editing sequence where, so this is the starting point of the shot, and the subject is right here in the middle, due north, and then they start walking over this way. This is the center point at the beginning of the shot, and then they walk over to here, and then at this point we cut to here, we pick up, in this shot, basically the matching action, we pick up these people walking over here, and they continue to walk, and they walk, this is again where the shot began, they walk over to here, and then we cut to this third shot where they're standing here at this edge of the pier. Okay? It's a natural progression, it works organically, your viewer naturally watches, and they turn their head and they follow, there's a cut, and they have no problem following, and then there's a cut, and they have no problem following. The problem is, by the time the third shot rolls around, they're looking over their shoulder, and it's uncomfortable, and now, what happens to the next shot after that? They're like now twisting themselves all around to follow the story. And this is something that can happen in a lot of contexts, but one way that you can fix this is by going back to the first shot and offsetting it in the opposite direction. So you basically go back, oh, we got screwed and we wound up with the third shot landing all the way to the edge. That didn't work. Let's back up all the shots to change that center point. So again, here's the first version, where the first shot started almost dead center. In the second version, we scooted that back a little bit this way. So now, when you open the shot, the action is not dead center, it's a little bit over there. Still in my field of view, I follow them to here, cut, follow them to here, cut, and now by the third shot, they're not dead center, but they're much closer to the center than they would be in the initial shot.
Well,
so this is a trick.
That raises the issue that when you do 3 shots like that, you've got to basically keep the same perspective in each shot.
That's exactly right. Or you don't have to, but if you don't, you're going to run into problems like this. Yeah. All right. Quickly, a couple little things about finishing your projects. Titles, graphics, transition effects. None of this is hard. There's software, mostly in Premiere, some in Final Cut 2, that will do this for you. You just have to be aware that you have to use special software when you're working with 360 footage. So, in this example, if you just slap a regular title on a video, on a 360 video, when it comes time to look in the headset, that title is going to look huge and distorted. If instead you use the special titling software built for 360, it will look tiny in your lat long, but when you look at it in the headset, it's going to look appropriate, and it's going to be distorted appropriately, so it doesn't look screwy. So again, the details of exactly what filter to use, I'm not going to try and show you today, but it's just important to remember that you do need to account for, if you're doing 360 stuff, you need to be using 360 aware software. And right now, that means Premiere and Final Cut, but even within those tools, you need to be using the 360 tools within them. You can't just do the default things that, and this is more for people that are familiar with these tools, that use them all the time, and they might just overlook this. But just to be keeping in mind that there are differences for 360. The same thing goes for transition effects, like this is a white or an iris, where in a traditional iris, it's just a circle that opens up that reveals the second shot, right? Well, you can do that with your footage, but if you do that with a traditional transition or a traditional iris, when you look at it in the goggles, it's going to be distorted. The circle's going to be distorted, and in fact, it's going to get cut off. It's just going to be a hole. Because remember, this wraps around to this. This is not actually a rectangle. It's actually a sphere. So instead, you use these special transitions for 360 in Premiere, and you get this, what looks like a distorted circle, but will look like a proper circle in the headset, and it wraps around automatically, so you don't have that little problem. And the same, so it's similar to the titling and other graphics. You just need to be aware that for 360 footage, you need to be using special tools. This is some just samples of those 360 transitions. And so yeah, there's a company called Metal that was doing all these. Adobe bought, they didn't buy the whole company Metal, but they bought all these tools. So this is all built into Premiere Pro now. Okay, other important effects we do. One of the most common things that we'll do is to remove the tripod or what we call the rig, the supporting, the evidence of the filmmaking that we don't want to see. We paint that out. And so there are many ways to do this. Again, these software tools now have plugins that make this pretty easy to do in many cases. But like you can see in the top shot, all this junk here at the bottom is the tripod. And in the bottom image, it's been removed. It's actually, in this case, we shot a plate. We just took a still camera with a similarly wide-angle lens as the VR camera and pointed it down at the ground, and then used that to cover up the image. And that we mainly do in After Effects.
And then you stitched it into the footage?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Just, I mean, you take the finished stitch and then just cover up that section of it. Another thing you can do is to cover the tripod with a logo. And so this is something that you'll see fairly commonly done. And it's quicker, it's cheaper, it's very, you slap that on there and you're done. And again, there's software that makes this pretty easy. And if you're looking at the lat long, it looks like this. If you look at it in your headset, you tilt your head down, it looks like this. This is not as immersive necessarily as there being nothing there, but you know, what I like to say is if your viewers are spending too much time looking at their feet, you're doing something else wrong. You're not going to solve it with a different logo.
I know it opens a whole can of worms to talk about moving shots, but
Yeah.
have you seen any decent rig removal software for that?
It gets really complicated.
Yeah.
Removing the rig from a moving shot is pretty tricky.
Yeah.
We did a tracking shot using an automated slider, like a mechanical slider that, so that there's nobody.
Motion control rig, yeah.
Yeah, right. And then we flipped it upside down and ran it again. So we had a plate shot, a tracking plate shot, never got it to work.
Really?
I never got it clean. Like, I mean, I at some point I was thinking, I can't, it's not worth the amount of effort. I've seen examples where people have gotten it work, but it's not nearly as straightforward as a simple tracking shot. And that was a motion control, so it should have been exactly the same. But the length, the camera was a different distance from the ground, and it just like you could see a seam line. And so it's a hard thing to do. Moving shots in general are very tricky, and it's also really disorienting for your viewer if the camera's moving. I considered doing a whole section here on moving shots. It was just a big can of worms, so I left it. It's generally what I would say is it's advanced technique to move the camera, much more so than with traditional film. Okay, this is a really clever and helpful one that whenever you shoot, this is similar to what you're talking about offsetting the camera. I always recommend adding a shot where everybody leaves the frame and you run the camera for a few seconds to get the empty environment. The way we get room tone, you guys know what room tone is with audio? So whenever you shoot audio for a film shoot, we always do a few seconds of what we call room tone, which is like the silence where nobody's talking, and whatever the environment of the space is, you have that audio that you can then use to cover up edits when you have to make audio edits. Well, for 360, I coined this term visual room tone, that it's a similar idea, that for every shot, you should always grab a few seconds of the empty space. And so here you've got an example where the director and the DP are here looking at the script while the scene's going on, and then right there in the shot, they're a couple feet from the camera. But because they got a plate, you just replace it. It's simple to replace because the camera's in exactly the same place. You just drop it in, everything's going to line up, and you've got, basically you're able to cut that out of the shot. You can use that to remove your crew, you can use that to remove lighting, or any other distracting elements. And it's just one of these things that I found, if you just keep it on your list of every shot you do, add a little piece of that, it can be a quick way to save you in post. All right, and then there's software for doing tracking and compositing if you're doing more elaborate VR, visual effects rather, and you want to add elements or you want to remove elements from your shots. There's software, Mocha VR is probably one of the leading ones, also Nuke and Fusion. There's other tools for it, but I think Mocha is a pretty solid one for tracking. Okay, compression and output. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because it gets very technical very quickly, but I want to just give you the name of this one tool that's really, really helpful called VR Encoder, and this is the link to it. It's free. Purple Pill is a Dutch company that makes apps. They make VR apps, or a 360 video app. They said you want to they're a really cool company doing some really neat stuff, but they found that all their clients were having trouble getting their files compressed. And the problem is that the video you need to play on your Gear VR is different than the video you'll need to play on your Oculus Rift, is different than the video you want to play in a cardboard viewer, and it's a nightmare. And if you want to upload your file to YouTube, it wants certain specs, and if you want to upload it to Vimeo, it wants different specs. This tool gives you this. Basically, you load a file into the directory, you pick the file where the directory where your file is, pick where you want to output, choose a bunch of settings. It takes forever. It's going to compress overnight. It's very slow.
Usually grabs one.
Well, I don't think there's any acceleration, and I mean I've done it on a couple different machines, and including one with a pretty rocky graphics card. So I think it's just slow, but the results are good, and it's just FFmpeg. It's just a shell for an open source compression tool, but it's a really nice, handy way for you to output your final files. Again, it's too technical to get into the details here, but just useful to know it exists.
Hardware acceleration. Yeah, it's on Windows. In fact, that does have
hardware acceleration.
On Windows with NVIDIA. Typically, most of VR tools work much better with NVIDIA than AMD, and Intel better than AMD as well.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a VR editing grid, certainly get an NVIDIA card.
Yeah. But I'd second that for sure. Engagement and interactivity, again, a broad topic. I just really want to touch on the possibilities for you. This is a screen from that software Wanda that we played with in the very beginning. This is the screen that had all those little circles on it, and this is the map that shows you how those videos are linked to that. One, it can do a lot more cool, complex things than this example. You can do stuff where there's hotspots embedded in a live action video, where it can automatically take you to a different scene depending on where you're looking, and some really cool stuff. And there are other tools, some of them listed over here, that are other tools that can create interactivity for your projects. There's also building custom applications in Unity, generally in Unity, where you can build all sorts of cool things where you can take your 360 video, each 360 video is just a piece of video like any other, but you can link them together in ways to create a feeling of interactivity or connection. And then finally, when you're ready to upload and share your project with the world, there are a wide range of venues. YouTube, like it or not, is still one of the best options. And Facebook has done a lot to make it easy for you to upload your files to Facebook. Some of these others, these three here, Veer and Little Star and Samsung VR, these are VR 360 specific. They're not, Vimeo, Facebook, and YouTube obviously can hold all sorts of source codes. Those bottom three are VR specific, and those are basically like YouTube's for VR basically. And then these tools here, Pixvana, Live Planet, WebVR, these are things that are more designed for building a more custom app and they provide cloud hosting and interactivity and other tracking tools so that you can get a little bit more control over your video, but they are naturally more expensive in that regard.
I have a quick question. The tiny camera has less angles than the large one, right?
This Samsung VR has two lenses.
Two lenses.
Two lenses. I showed you that this one has one lens, and there are some that have as many as 30 cameras and everything in between.
Oh, okay.
So it really varies widely. So we've come to that time of the night where we get to pick a blue ticket, and this is a raffle to win a copy of the book. I've got a card here, let's see. The number is,
Do you have to be present to win?
I think you do, 463 6851. Several people have left. Maybe on the second card.
I have 5-2.
5-1?
5-2.
All right, well.
4-9.
All right, here's another number. 463 6856.
Yeah.
All right, here we are. Woo! You get a copy of the book. I do have a few copies for sale if you're interested, or you can buy it online at that website up there. You bet. All right, enjoy. And importantly, you can download this presentation. It won't be up for about a week. This presentation, as well as Jason's presentation from the Humans in VR session earlier today, at this address over here. And I recommend that for sure, because that way you can review all the things we've talked about. And then lastly up here is this is the Shave LA code for the event in LA. That's right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is in there. So when you register for the event, that'll save you $100.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that event? I'm not sure what it is.
Ernie needs to tell you more about the Shape event.
Yeah, what is the event?
Okay, so the Shape event,
You
it's,
want to speak in the mic?
oh, good idea. Sorry. Is it on? Okay, the Shape event is IBM's, AT&T's largest event that we do all year. We're actually, 2 years ago, we rented out the Giants Stadium in San Francisco.
It's on.
Okay, I'll speak very loudly or as loud as I can. So it's like a huge event. The last year and this year, we're actually renting out a big chunk of the Warner Brothers studio. And we bring in, like Catherine Bigelow from Hurt Locker was there last year. There are names of people, I don't even know who they are, but very big names come in, top AT&T executives. We have a number of things, do tours of Warner Brothers lots. We have some competitions, which I mentioned at the beginning, one of which is called a Create-a-thon, where people actually submit scripts, we pick the scripts, and then we give them 3 hours on a back lot to shoot a scene that they put into a film, a short film that they do, and they could win up to $20,000 worth of prizes. There's VR demonstration. It's just a huge 2-day event. As I say, it's the biggest event that AT&T does, period. So it's on the 2nd and 3rd of June, obviously down in LA, and normally costs $100 if you put Meet ATT, and then make sure you hit the, I forget what it's called. There's a button to the right that will take it, and then you don't have to pay. It won't ask for the credit card info. And the one thing on the bit.ly, that is case sensitive.
So that, like that's how.
Yeah, make sure you get that right.
DevLab SF.
And that's where you can download the presentation for this, and also for Jason's course earlier.
When would that be available?
It depends on when I get them from these guys and when I have time to do it. Let's just say the early to mid part of next week.
Okay, all right.
And I know we're now over time, so obviously take off if you need to, but I'm happy to stick around for a little bit if you guys have some questions.
Yeah,
One thing I should say, can't stay too long because the guy who works here actually is going to set up for another event tomorrow morning early. So we can talk, but maybe want to head out and then also don't forget to do the survey.
Please do the survey.
Yeah, it's really valuable to all of us. You can just leave it on the table on the